All right, welcome. So, what if I told you that all those big, epic conflicts we see between nations, the clashes of civilizations, the geopolitical chess games, what if they aren't really what they seem? Today, we're going to unpack a really provocative idea from a text that points to one single, kind of shocking root cause for all of it. Let's get right into it. So this gets right to the heart of the argument. We're always told that conflicts happen because of these huge, deep-seated differences, culture, geography, political systems, but the author of our source material just sweeps all of that aside. They argue that underneath all those labels, pretty much every international conflict is actually just a squabble between a few individuals, people the author calls power figures. So to really get our heads around this, here's our plan. First, we'll dig into this wild idea of a clash of rulers. Then, we'll zero in on who the author thinks are the real drivers of conflict. After that, we'll look at the psychological trick they use. It's called the thinking function pathology. Then, we'll check out the proposed solution, and we'll wrap up with a question that's really going to make you think.
Okay, let's start with this central claim. This idea that the real battlefield isn't between countries, but between their leaders.
This quote right here, this is the core of the whole theory. The author is saying that powerful people have their own disagreements, right? It could be over resources, influence, whatever. But to get millions of people on board with their personal fight, they have to package it. They wrap it up in the flag, they talk about patriotic duty, and suddenly their personal problem becomes a national cause. The fight is personal, the packaging makes it national. So if it's not nations fighting, then who are these key players really? Let's take a closer look at how the author defines them. The author calls them power figures. And listen, these aren't just presidents or prime ministers. They're any individuals inside what the author calls a small society. That's their term for a nation or state. These figures know how to use the systems of power for one main reason, to control the people and the resources, usually for their own benefit, and they're not always nice about it. Now this is where it gets really interesting, because it's all about deconstructing the words we use. That phrase, clash of civilizations, the author says, nope. The differences between societies come down to how well-developed their collective ability to think critically is. Geopolitical conflicts? That's just power figures using actual differences in geography to their advantage. And isolationism? The author claims that's just a handy label for countries where the power figures are so busy exploiting their own people, they're terrified of anyone from the outside looking in. So this brings us to the really crucial part. How on earth do these power figures get entire populations to go along with it all? Well, the author has this fascinating concept to explain it, basically a sickness or pathology of a society's ability to think clearly. And it's called the human thinking function. The best way to think about it is like a society's collective mental immune system. It's our combined power for critical thought, for reason, for creativity. When that immune system is strong, people can spot manipulation a mile away. But when it's weak, that's when a society becomes vulnerable. And this is the playbook. It's a three-step process for making that immune system sick. First, the power figures work to disconnect people from their own critical thinking, make them doubt themselves. Second, they simplify life's purpose down to one simple, often extreme mission. Could be religious, could be political. And once a population's thinking is diseased like this, step 3 is easy. They can be exploited again and again. Okay, so if that's the problem, what's the fix? The author doesn't really talk about treaties or sanctions. The solution they propose is something way more fundamental. The way out is through education. It's about teaching everyone to see this dynamic between power figures and the societies they run. It's about educating people about their own worth, their nobility, as the author puts it, and showing them exactly how a weakened thinking function makes them a target. The solution is basically an inoculation of knowledge. And that's the bottom line. The author argues that for any society, the absolute #1 priority, more important than the economy, military strength, more important than anything else, has to be the health of its people's collective ability to think critically and freely. And that brings us to the end, but the author doesn't leave us with a neat little conclusion. Instead, we're left with a challenge, a question we all have to think about. It's a really powerful question when you think about it. I mean, if every single nation on Earth made critical, independent thought its highest value, could their leaders even get away with packaging their personal fights as national wars? Would a population that's truly thinking for itself even follow them?
And that just leads to the final, even bigger question. If all those manufactured conflicts just vanished, what would be left to divide us? If you strip away all the manipulation, the author is basically asking us what true, fundamental differences would actually be left between people. And that is a really provocative thought to end on.